session to order for the April 13th, 2021 Planning Commission. Do you want to, are we recording now? Thank you. Okay, so we'll do a roll call. Chair Simpson is here. Vice Chair Kai.
Here.
Commissioner Bance.
I'm here.
Commissioner Giles. Oops, was that a here? It was a squeak.
Oh, you hear me now?
Almost, yes.
Okay, I will adjust and I am here. I will.
Okay, I can hear you now.
Squeak.
All right, Commissioner Harsh.
Here.
All right, excellent. All right, Miss Julia, I believe you're taking this one, are you not?
I am, and I'll be turning it over to our consultant here in a minute. First, I need to apologize. The window is just sun right on me, so hopefully you can see me. I can barely see you guys, and hopefully the sun will settle here in a little bit, and I'll be able to see again. But we are here today to talk to you about the 2021 Urban Renewal Plan that the city is considering. You will be having a public hearing in a few weeks to hear this and make a recommendation. So we thought it would be best if you understand what an urban renewal area is and what it isn't and what your role is before it comes to you, and give you a little bit of an opportunity to ask more questions and get a little bit more depth. So I'm going to turn it over to Elaine Howard. She's part of our consultant team that's been helping us with this, and she's going to give you a lot of information in a very little bit amount of time. I think what I'll ask is if people have questions, if they can raise their hands, and then I'll try to interrupt Elaine and call on them as it seems to work. So Elaine, I'll go ahead and turn it over to you to share your screen and begin.
Well, it said it was sharing. What are you seeing?
We do see something, but
See slide 23.
It said suggested motion for future meeting.
Oh, that's not what we want, is it?
You skip to the end. Everybody's going to know.
Okay, and is that full screen for you?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you. As Julia says, I cannot see you on my screen when I'm running the presentation. So if you have questions, raise your hand or type something in the chat so she can see you and interrupt me. I'm one of the consultants working on this project. I work always with Tiberius Solutions, who works on all of the financial analysis as part of urban renewal. And of course, we've had tons of input from the city of Sherwood and an advisory committee. So what we are going through tonight is the role of the Planning Commission, and then a little bit of Urban Renewal 101. So why cities use urban renewal, how urban renewal works, what are the projects that are projected for this area, and the comprehensive plan categories that we analyze for conformance to comprehensive plan, and then what the next steps are. The role of a planning commission is not specifically identified. ORS, Oregon Revised Statute 457, governs urban renewal. And in ORS 457, it says that a planning commission must review the plan. And it also says that the plan must conform to the comprehensive plan. So those of us who are practitioners in urban renewal have tied those two together, because the comprehensive plan really is the purview of the Planning Commission. So that is what we need an actual action from you on, and we'll talk about that at the very end slide also. However, you may ask questions about any part of the plan. That doesn't mean we're trying to limit you just to asking questions about the comprehensive plan. But that is what we are hoping for an action from you on. So urban renewal is a local government tool used by cities across the state to improve and revitalize areas of the city. It's used sometimes to implement economic development strategies and comprehensive plan goals. It allows local governments to focus investments on a particular area of their city to encourage public and private development to happen in that area. Urban renewal works off of property tax revenue. So every year we all pay our property taxes, and property tax revenue increases by two different means. There is an allowed 3% increase on the assessed value of our properties annually, and that typically happens unless we're in a big recession. And then property taxes may go up if you do a substantial improvement on your property, or if you buy vacant property and do new construction. When an urban renewal area is formed in a part of the city, represented by the blue on this slide, the increases in those property tax revenues over time will go to the urban renewal agency. Those increases start at the time an urban renewal plan is adopted, and it is only the increases on the taxes on the assessed value within the urban renewal area. So not the city as a whole, just that property that's within the urban renewal area. All of the different property taxing jurisdictions, and those are the county, TVFNR, the school district, the city itself, continue receiving their taxes off of the assessed value of those properties at the time they were entered into urban renewal. But they forego the taxes, the increases that we talked about on the prior slides due to that 3% annual increase or new construction or substantial rehabilitation. And the taxes off of that go to the urban renewal agency. I'll stop there just for a second to see if there are any questions on that.
I'm not seeing anybody's hands raised.
Okay. So the question is, why do cities choose to use urban renewal? And a lot of times cities use urban renewal because they have adopted city plans like the Tonkin Employment Area Plan, and they don't have the funding to do the projects that are recommended in those plans. So cities do a lot of planning, which is great, but that planning doesn't typically have a funding source attached to it. So urban renewal provides opportunity to provide funding for improvements and redevelopment in a city, for a lot of the infrastructure improvements. And also if you are trying to get an area of your city to develop that hasn't developed otherwise, and it's because it's not financially feasible, urban renewal may provide a funding source to bridge the gap of what is feasible and what isn't feasible. We'll talk a little more about projects in your proposed plan in a couple of slides. This shows the proposed urban renewal area boundary. This is not a typical urban renewal area boundary. A typical urban renewal boundary has parcels and roads that are all identified in a specific area, and everything's kind of neat and clean. Your boundary includes 3 different areas of parcels, and it includes a lot of that. Those are shown in the pale yellow, and it includes those red streets right of way, and those are specifically to be able to provide broadband to the city. So using urban renewal to help fund installing the broadband in those areas where it does not exist. So you may have urban renewal areas that are not directly contiguous unless tied together through right-of-way. So on the yellow parcels, those are tied by right-of-way. And then the red lines all connect in some way. This is like a big puzzle for us to use, but they all connect in some way to provide your boundary. It does not include any parcel that is presently in your existing urban renewal area. Any question on the boundary?
Where is the existing boundary? Is that shown somewhere?
It is not shown on this map, but if you look directly at the center of the map in your downtown area, that is, and let's see, I have a pointer. It is in this area of your city. So
it's pretty much the center of the city. The commercial area is up along 99 near 12th and Sherwood Road, and then a little bit of a cherry stem down to our Old Town area. And we did, oh gosh, a while ago, we did remove some parcels from our existing URA to shrink it significantly so that we could consider forming this. And then also, as Elaine said, take some properties out that we wanted to have in this one.
we initially did a feasibility study on all 3 areas that you see here in yellow separately. And then when we discussed that with the city council felt like those areas should be combined into one urban renewal area that is much more efficient administratively for the city. So that is why everything is tied together here, although there are potential projects in all 3 of those areas, and Julia will go through those projects in a couple of slides. Any other questions on the boundary?
It looks like Commissioner Vance had a question, unless he was the one that asked the question. I'm not sure.
No, I do have a question though. And it's back to the benefits of this thing. I think you said it has to do with funding, because funding might not be there for some of these places otherwise. But if I was tracking with you right, and I watched the video earlier too, it sounds, I mean, no taxes are changing. So it's just like the regular increase of the property taxes starts getting kind of siphoned off and put into a coffer toward this stuff. Well, those taxes are going to the city anyway, right? I mean, why? I guess I'm trying to figure out, like, where is the additional funding that wouldn't otherwise be there? If the taxes are going to come in anyway, why doesn't the city just set them aside and use them for that purpose later, rather than like designating it this? Or does this come with other benefits? It doesn't sound like the actual income really changes. So how does that add to it?
That's a great question, and we have slides coming very shortly that will answer that.
Oh, perfect. Sorry to jump the gun then. Thanks.
No, that's fine. It's kind of the key question, isn't it? About why did this? Where does the money come from? So no problem.
And Chair Simpson, did you have a question on this map?
Well, not on the map. I just had a quick layman's answer for why an urban renewal district is different than just changing money out of the general fund. But I'll wait to see if the slides.
Okay.
Okay. So this is kind of back to our Urban Renewal 101. And the thing that citizens are most interested in is urban renewal a new tax? And no, urban renewal is not a new tax. Urban renewal is a division of taxes from all the other taxing districts. So not just the city itself, but from the other taxing entities. And that answers part of the prior question of why doesn't the city just set aside money? Because the city is only a portion of the permanent property tax rate. So if it was just the city alone, they would only get a portion of that rate. But urban renewal allows them to claim 100% of the tax rate on the increase in value. This is how that concept works in showing it in a different graph. And this shows the frozen base at the bottom, and that doesn't mean property taxes are frozen. It means the assessor establishes an assessed value of the property at the time an area is adopted. All the property taxing districts continue getting taxes off of that. And then the increment is that increase in the frozen base over time, above the frozen base over time, and the value upon which the Urban Renewal Agency will get funds. I'm going to go forward just to this graph just so it helps explain that question a little more. This shows the entire city permanent rate taxes, and it shows that the city of Sherwood is only 26% of that entire pie. The Sherwood School District is 38%, and Washington County is 18%, TVF&R is 12%, and then there are a number of other smaller taxing districts. We need to understand that the school district and the regional education service district are not directly impacted by urban renewal. They're indirectly impacted because their funding comes through the state school fund on a per pupil basis. And that state school fund is backfilled with many different funding sources to be able to meet that per pupil ratio. And that ratio does not decrease because a locality has urban renewal in their locality. So if the city just dedicated their own tax revenue, they would get 26% of the dollar, where if you have an urban renewal area, you get 100% of the dollar.
Okay. Yeah,
Okay.
that makes sense. But all these other agencies kind of lose out.
They do.
Do they get a say in the process, or they just sort of lose out?
That's a great question. We've had an advisory committee, and the county, TVF&R, and the school district were part of that advisory committee and gave recommendations throughout the process. So the bigger, higher impacted districts. However, the city council has the authority to establish an urban renewal area on their own. So the other districts do not get to vote on whether or not the urban renewal plan is adopted, but we have asked for their input. The reason those districts would support urban renewal is because if you do projects that provide incentives for employment or incentives for new construction, and that's especially true in your Tonkin employment area, there will then become a tax base within that area for them to enjoy in the future. Whereas if that infrastructure is not installed and doesn't get installed, you don't know really if that area is going to end up getting developed in the future, or how long it will take for it to get developed. So they eventually, when urban renewal ends, will enjoy the increased assessed values within the area.
Yeah, another way to think about it is that they, if it weren't for the urban renewal, that increment wouldn't be increasing anyways. And so they're not necessarily, I mean, they might be losing out on some, but they're only losing out on that increment because we're investing in the urban renewal area in the first place.
Thank you.
So an urban renewal area functions with an income source, and that income source is those yearly property tax collections based on the growth within the area. It has its expenses, which are projects, programs, and administration of the urban renewal area, and has a spending limit that is capped by maximum indebtedness figure. Maximum indebtedness is the total amount of money that may be spent over the life of an urban renewal district on projects, programs, and administration. So that is really the controlling feature for different taxing districts to know when will this urban renewal area end. Duration is not a requirement of the statute, so the urban renewal area actually ends at the point that the area reaches its proposed maximum indebtedness. And that maximum indebtedness is established when the plan is adopted. And Julia, I don't have that number right in front of me. Do you have it? the maximum indebtedness for the area. I can get to that soon if you don't have it
I'm
close.
sorry, I don't have that.
I can get to that. I'm not sure I put it on one of the slides, and if not, when we get rid of the slideshow, I can find it easily. Property taxes and urban renewal, again, this is a pretty complicated concept, and we aren't going to go into it deeply now, but there is some information on the webpage to go into this. But everyone in the city will have urban renewal on their property tax bill, so that you have an urban renewal area now if you own property within the city. Even though it's not in the urban renewal area, you have a line item on your property tax bill. That is a very confusing process of why that happens, and it takes about half an hour to go through all of that just on its own. But the 30-second analysis is the assessor is required to first calculate the increase assessed value within the urban renewal area. And let's say that is $1 million. And then calculate how much taxes would be raised off of that. So you multiply that times your tax rate. And then the assessor is required to distribute that to all property tax bills within the city. And that doesn't mean that their property tax bill goes up. It means that the amount of taxes that the other taxing districts receive will go down, and it is equal to the total amount of growth within the area. And then the assessor collects those property tax revenues from every property within the city. So again, that's pretty complicated. And if at the end, that's something anybody wants to concentrate on after we talk about comp plan issues, we can come back to that. The impacts of urban renewal are on the other taxing districts, including the city itself. It doesn't provide new money. It diverts funds that would otherwise go to those taxing districts. They continue receiving taxes on the frozen base, but they forego taxes on that growth until the area ends. And the final statement of that is what Julia just said is in many areas that growth may not have occurred but for the investments of urban renewal and infrastructure to allow parcels to be infrastructure ready for development. Again, the impact on schools is indirect. So on most property taxing jurisdiction, the impact looks like this. It's straight local property tax revenues, impact those revenues that go to the taxing jurisdiction. This is how the state school fund equalization formula works. And it is just as complicated to explain as it looks. But the impact on this is indirect, as the state school fund impact is after all of the other funding sources have been added into that local states, that state school fund, and then reallocated out. And again, we can spend more time on that too if that becomes a key issue for anyone. These are the project locations, and I'm going to let Julia pick up from here. There are, on the right here, it shows all of the different projects, and then the next two slides shows the amount of money expected to be spent on those projects, but this just helps you see what the location is.
Yeah, and I'll go through this briefly. And also, Elaine mentioned our webpage. We're actually going to be getting announcements out tomorrow about a virtual open house, and there will be notice in the Archer, I think, going out to mailboxes this week to really get people out there. And in the virtual open house provides this map, the projects, the plan, as well as some videos that explain what Elaine has been talking about in a little bit more detail. The projects that we're doing in the URA plan, for the most part, are supporting the Tonkin employment area. So that's the big box, the 10, 11, 12, and 13. That's infrastructure to support the development of the Tonkin employment area. Some intersection improvements near there, as well as development of the tannery site, cleanup of the tannery site, and then development of the public works facility and improvements along Oregon Street. There is the development of the Robin Hood Theater lot into a festival plaza that can be utilized for parking when there are not festivals and events, but will be designed to accommodate festivals and events a little bit better with electricity and lighting and that kind of stuff. There is also the up across from the Home Depot, an extension of Langer Farms Parkway to support development in that area. There is, if you look at 7, that is potential funding for Cedar Creek Trail undercrossing. 8 is Cedar Brook Way extension, that project. And then 5 is the pedestrian bridge. That's the red circle at the, well, you know where the pedestrian bridge would be, at the YMCA. So that's kind of the summary of those projects. And like Elaine said, we had explored doing individual urban renewal areas, but it just made more sense to do one larger area that could sort of support all of the projects and grow the tax bases. Just saw somebody raise their hand, but I don't see. Oh, Commissioner Simpson.
Were the projects vetted through the city council already? Is that the original list of projects came from?
Yeah, the original, so it sort of was iterative where staff looked at the potential urban renewal areas and projects that we had within those, mainly transportation system plan projects. So we looked at the CIP and our master plans. We had way more projects than we had the potential funding for. And so we whittled that down and had some work sessions with council to whittle that down a little bit further. And essentially the projects that are in front of you are the projects that are both necessary and things that could be funded by the urban renewal area. I don't see any other questions. Elaine, do you want to go to the next slides?
Yes, and I see somehow when I picked up the slide, I put in the overcrossing instead of undercrossing on Cedar Creek Trail. So that needs to be changed. Otherwise, these are the same projects that Julia just went through, and the amount of funding that is anticipated to go to those from the urban renewal plan and what percentage of the total cost that would be. And I don't know, Julia, whether you want to go through that item by item, or this is half of them, the other half are on the next slide.
I don't think so unless there are questions. I mean, really the numbers came from the master plans. If we had them from the master plans, that was the majority of the numbers. So yeah, I mean, I'm happy to answer questions, but that's our best guess number. They may change. They may be higher. They may be lower. Oh, sorry. My cat has decided she wants to participate. Sorry, you've seen me throw her off to my side. So yeah, are there any questions on those?
Yeah, and this is the other project listing sheet to show the remainder of the projects. So as you can see, the majority of them are purely infrastructure projects, some transportation safety projects and trails, and the pedestrian bridge over Highway 99 that connects the school and the YMCA. So those are all community priorities. So it provides those incentives also.
And I see Commissioner Simpson has her hand raised, and then Commissioner Giles.
So two funding questions. First, the line items that are less than 100%, is there a place to look to see where the other funding is coming from? And then in the Tonquin employment area, I see we're paying 100% of those infrastructure. Are we going to be recovering any of that through our development process?
Yeah, and that was really to kind of illustrate some of those projects that for the advisory committee. So, for example, the public works facility, that will not be 100% funded by the URA because there will be rates and fees and things like that. It doesn't, the urban renewal area shouldn't be paying 100% of those. I believe the pedestrian bridge we had listed as a percentage because we anticipate getting some outside funding. The other projects, I'm sorry, I'm looking. Oh, so some of them we know we're going to get outside funding. The other ones we still will seek outside funding. So they might not be 100%. And then absolutely we will be collecting system development charges, TDT. There will be, we will require, dedication as proportional. We just didn't have that amount that we would assume that we would be able to assume in those.
So I have a follow-up to that first. So would the money then be available for additional spending after we recover that, or would it still be earmarked for projects in the urban renewal area?
Let me try first and then Elaine can correct me, but we can only spend the amount that we say we're going to spend on the projects that we say we're going to spend them on. We might spend more on some projects and less on other projects, but we can't spend on projects that are not in the plan unless we amend the plan to include more projects. And that's a process that Elaine could explain. And we can't spend more than we said we're going to spend. So if we get a lot of outside funding and we don't need to use as much money as we had anticipated, then in the future city council will have to determine if they close the URA or amend it or what have you. And Elaine, I probably totally messed that up, so maybe you can add on.
Yeah, that's all correct. And I think a follow-up question is, if I'm developing in the TEA and I pay my SDCs, those SDCs are paid to the city, and they then go into your SDC fund and may be used anywhere. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So if you pay for transportation, some transportation out of the urban renewal funds and SDCs come in, I don't think there is a city requirement that it go directly to the project. I just don't know the answer to that, Julia. So it could go to other projects in the city, so provide you more capacity to do other improvements in the city because some of these are paid through urban renewal.
Yeah, that's absolutely true.
Okay, thank you for that answer. My other question is, if you go back a slide, the Cedar Creek Trail overcrossing 99W, is that different than the pedestrian bridge at 99W? Yes. So
yeah.
there'd be two over it.
Well, and like Elaine said, she misstated that. When we did the Cedar Creek Trail feasibility study years ago now, and there were two sort of concepts, either an undercrossing or an overcrossing. I believe that we used the money for the overcrossing in this assessment because we know it's we know it's going to be less. I mean, it's going to be more than $7 million. But we wanted to be able to rely on something that we were using. So we used the number from the overcrossing, but we anticipate it will likely be an undercrossing, sort of a continuation of the Cedar Creek Trail. What we're currently planning on doing with the trail is connecting it to 99 and having an at-grade, walking path along 99 to Meineke, and then you could pick up the trail from there. Ultimately, we would like to not have you have to do that, and having that connection under 99. So that is different than the 99W pedestrian crossing at Sunset.
Okay, and that's been, I guess I haven't seen the plans for that. Maybe I missed the meeting, but is that is that something that is settled on that location and not maybe doing the overpass at Meineke to have it nearer the high school, the old high school, and
I wouldn't say it's settled. We actually have some money in the CIP for next fiscal year to begin kind of fleshing that out a little bit more. It's settled to a certain extent because it's part of the Cedar Creek Trail, so it's not going to be somewhere not near that. But we'll get into that a little bit more. And I believe the feasibility study is like maybe even 10 years old at this point. So I'm not surprised that you haven't seen it because it hasn't been really kind of, we still use it, on a regular basis as we're applying for funding and we're working on trying to implement the Cedar Creek Trail in its entirety, but it's not something that sort of publicly is out there these days. Other questions on the projects? We're kind of getting short on time, so I want to make sure that we get to what the Planning Commission's role is going to be at the hearing. So, Elaine, I think we're kind of getting to that point.
We're there, yes. So, back to my initial slide, which is saying that the urban renewal plan conforms to the comprehensive plan. And years ago, that would be like a 2-paragraph statement in an urban renewal plan, and they would just make the statement without any backup. And over the years, that has transformed into, as all planning documents have, a much larger section of the plan where we actually look at each different comprehensive plan category and see if any of the projects relate to that category directly. So in the urban renewal plan draft that you will get, the categories that we reviewed were land use, economic development policies and strategies, transportation, natural resources and hazards, energy, and community facilities and services. We went through those categories and pulled out the goals that directly related in there to the actual projects to be able to justify that those projects did conform to statements within your comprehensive plan. So it's a much more thorough analysis than it used to be. And basically what you're trying to say is, yes, these types of things are the types of things our city is wanting to do. And those kinds of policies of providing a walkable city and providing pedestrian connections and providing for new employment, which are all of those things that you're doing by the projects within the plan, are supported for and provided for in your comprehensive plan. So typically when I go to that next meeting, you will get all of this information and read through it. And there's, I don't know, 10 or 15 pages. I don't typically go through each item because it seems a waste of your valuable time. So we expect that. I mean, I always offer to if people want me to, if the commissioners want me to. But we hope that you will read through that section of the urban renewal plan. And then just if you have specific questions on any of those categories or feel like we've missed something really important that you want us to add in, then we can do that at that time. And then let me go through this slide and then we'll open up for questions. At the next meeting, we'll be suggesting a motion for you to adopt. And the reason we suggest it is we are trying to pick up the language in the statute. So it's not to presume you couldn't do a motion on your own, but there are specific words in the statute that we like in the motion, and those conforms with. So the motion is, I move the Sherwood Planning Commission finds, based on the information provided in the staff report and attachments, that the Sherwood 2021 Urban Renewal Plan conforms with the City of Sherwood Comprehensive Plan. And that way that exactly meets the language that's in the statute about finding that conformance. And then some planning commissions like to also recommend that the council adopt the urban renewal plan. That's definitely not a requirement, but many planning commissions are so supportive of everything that they want to add that onto the motion. So that is totally individual.
Commissioner Simpson or Chair Simpson, sorry.
Yeah. So will you be sending out this PowerPoint to the commission so that not only do we have the motion so we can correctly make it at our meeting, but so
Yes.
that we can review it again? Thank you.
Yes, and Jean, that motion will actually be in the recommended portion of the staff report.
All right, Erica, thank you. I know that we're almost out of time, but we have to leave this meeting to go to the next meeting, correct? I just want to make sure I know what I'm doing. Okay, yeah.
So before we close, I guess I have a question for Elaine. So several things. If you have any questions that you just can't wait for, or you just need to talk through, feel free to give me a call, or Bruce Coleman, who's also here, a call to try to talk you through your questions, and or we can have Elaine talk about it at the, she's not going to be at the Planning Commission meeting. So we can answer your questions. We want to make sure that you are comfortable with what you're doing. And so if you have any questions about the process, the staff report that you see when you get it, give us a call. But Elaine, can you talk about the hearing? The Planning Commission is very used to quasi-judicial public hearings and even legislative hearings where they're making a recommendation. Can you just talk briefly about how their hearing may be different than what they're used to?
Right. This isn't a typical quasi-judicial hearing. It is just what's called just a legislative hearing. And you aren't making, other than your motion, you aren't making findings. You don't even have to have a hearing, but we recommend you do, just in case there's anybody who wants to comment on it. And that seems to be the way to allow people at most planning commissions, the only way to allow people to comment on an item. So we want to get as much public input as is out there. So we don't want to exclude anybody from commenting on something. And that's why it was, it's typically made into a public hearing at the Planning Commission level.
Thanks. And then this will go, this says it will go to the City Council for a hearing on May 18th. And they have a first and second reading. So we would expect that they would have their second reading on June 1st.
It's from my watch. I don't have
Any questions that we can answer? All right, I will turn it back over to you, Chair Simpson, to take back over the meeting.
Thank you. I guess we're ready to wrap up this meeting and pop on to our Planning Commission meeting, which requires all of us to sign off and then go sign off on another meeting. Elaine, thank you very much for your very well-worded explanation. Urban renewal districts can be confusing if they're not well explained. So thank you.
Yes, thank you all for your time.
Thank you.